what happens beyond that? Because again, another role that you've soaked up, another role that you've learnt. You've most definitely learnt stuff from.
Yeah.
What happens after that? Where do you head off to?
So this is another one where we come into the nuances. Excuse me. We come into the nuances of the officer corps, because having done my desk job, having done my command job, then all of a sudden I was told that a TA command, because in the army, not just the Army Air Corps, but in the army, a TA command counts as half a tick, not a full tick, because I suppose a lot of TA units are only at weekends with a little bit of extra work, whereas we were flying 7 days a week, certainly 5 days a week, but quite often at the weekends as well. So it was a full time. So there was a point where I was suddenly told, you need to be a second in command of a regiment to complete your tick. So I was a bit ticked off with that, to say the least. So I then speaking to our Manny Records, and they said, "Oh yeah, but you're only was I 31? Yeah, 31. No, sorry, 34, 35. I was told I was too young to be a second in command of a regiment. I think I was 35. I'm just trying to add up the years now. 36. So I was told I was too young to be a second in command. I said, but I need to be a second in command to do the job. Now, this is one of these ones where, so I had Denzel Sharp, who helped me just because he realised the system was against me trying to get regular commission. At that time, before I went to Netheravon, the brigadier in charge of the Army Air Corps at the time, he phoned me up and said, "Ian, do you like shooting?" When I was still at Abbey Wood, I said, "Yes, brigadier." Thinking, well, I'm a soldier, of course I like shooting. He said, "Lovely, I'd like you to be the secretary of the Netheravon shoot." So I mean, never shot a shotgun before or anything like that. I was suddenly going, "Yeah, okay, brigadier, thanks. You don't say no, do you?" So I ended up being the Salisbury Plain split up into a number of different sections for shoots, and the Netheravon shoot was a very small one. A lot of very old people, ex-military, and a few regulars serving there. Anyway, he was the chair of it, or the president of it, and so I was doing all the sort of the legwork, sorting everything out, and what have you. But there were a lot of tenant farmers all around there, so we had to keep them happy as well, because places we could go and couldn't go. And so I used to go and brief the brigadier. He was down at Middlewallop, just down the road. When I was in Netheravon, I don't know, every 3 weeks, every month, just give him a brief on where we are with the farmers, where we are with the shoot, and all those sort of things. Anyway, it just so happened it was just after I'd been told, "Oh, by the way, you don't qualify for your command yet, and you need to do a second in command, but you're too young." I just heard that when I was due to go and give him a brief, and I just went in to his office, and after about 5 minutes, he just went, "What's the matter? You're normally always bubbly and just laughing and enjoying life. What's the matter?" I said, "No," and you just got to say, "It's nothing, brigadier. It's okay." He said, "Tell me. Sit down." And bless him. So he did. So I told him, and he went, "Could you just wait outside for a minute?" So I went outside, and then I got called back in. He said, "Right, Ian, we see the problem. So we will get you a second in command squadron. The challenge is, do you want to go to Northern Ireland or Germany?" "Germany, please, brigadier." "Son, it's done." And that was it. So I got promoted, or it's not promoted, sorry. I got posted back to 1 Regiment Army Air Corps in Germany as second in command of the regiment. And subsequently, we found out that they'd turned over the Army Air Corps, not having to qualify by doing a 2ICs tour. However, by the by, because I wasn't going to get promoted at that stage probably anyway. Well, I wasn't. And that was probably my best tour. Second in command of regiment was just an awesome, awesome job. It was just fantastic. So, yeah, there was the next tick where just somebody helped me along the road of something's not quite right here. So,
and whereabouts is this location again? You said Germany, but
Gütersloh.
It's Gütersloh.
Back to Gütersloh. Yeah. Back to Gütersloh.
And how long are you there for?
That was a 3-year tour as well.
That was a 3-year tour. Why was it one of your best? What made it? Was it the role, or was it what you did whilst you were there?
Mainly the role, partly the people, and partly what we were doing. It was just so the role itself. I'll say this and a little bit, and people will comment on this, but commanding officers sit there and sort of talk to the senior people and give a bit of direction, apart from in wartime. And the second in command gets on and runs the regiment. That's the way it works. You're the glue that pulls everything together. You're the things that make sure all things are sorted out for, whether you're designing exercises and everything else. You just do all of that work. And I just loved doing that. And my first commanding officer at the time was a chap called Chris Collett, and he was brilliant. And he was one who actually also got me another little a tick in the box of how to help my own career. But the people were brilliant. The location was superb. We had a great bunch of all the officers commanding, i.e. the squadron commanders were all majors. I was a major, but I was the senior major as the 2IC, but we all got on really well. It was a fantastic environment. My second son was born out there. It was just a great environment. The people were super. And then what we ended up doing, I mean, literally as I started, Chris Collett had to go out on exercise Safe Syria, I think it was, out in, I want to say Oman, but I might be wrong.
Safe Syria 2 Oman.
Was it Oman?
Yeah,
there you go.
2001. Yeah,
that's right. That's good. Yeah. 2001 was when I took over.
There you go.
So he was out there. So I was effectively de facto running the regiment, and that's when we had 9/11, and of course the world just fell apart. So there was a huge amount, and because it was an airfield, even though there were logistics regiments on the airfield, we had a lot of control over that. Although there was a small brigade, logistics brigade headquarters there as well. So there was just a lot involved to get all the different security protocols and everything in place, and make sure everything, what it's like, everything just suddenly clamps down. So that was really exciting. What else did we do? Just trying to think of a bunch of other stuff that went on as 2IC. We had, the SAS were using, we're doing an exercise out in Romania, and the normal unit that supported them couldn't. So they came to us, said, could you send out a couple of Lynx helicopters? And I sort of had a deal with them. Can I send out the whole regiment? If I can, then yeah, we can support you. So we actually deployed the whole regiment to Romania, which was just superb. Going back and forward to set everything up, just the whole environment, the flying itself. It was just an eye opener, I mean, all the vehicles had to go over on trains across 4 different countries, and how people would jump on trains and just slash open vehicles to try and rob whatever they could, and throw, and you can't do anything. All these anyway, but it was a really, really exciting tour. While I'm just trying to think when I got to, so just take you back very slightly to when I was talking about Chris Collett. We had a new brigadier, Andrew Gregory, who'd taken over as CRA, Commander Royal Artillery, in the divisional headquarters in Germany. So the Army Air Corps came under the CRA, so under Andrew Gregory, and it was a conversation that Chris Collett was having with Andrew Gregory when Andrew Gregory asked, so what's happening with Ian then and his career? So what is he, 42, 43? That's the normal age for a 2IC in those days, for certainly Army Air Corps. And Chris went, no, Ian's 36. I went, well, why don't we know about him? And all of a sudden, Chris said, right, the brigadier's coming down. You need to present to him. I'm not going to. You need to present to him. So he put me in front of Andrew Gregory, so Andrew Gregory could see who I was. Because in the past, I would go, I'm good enough. You'll promote me. Give me a good job, whatever. And I've never been one of these ones to sort of be in people's faces and career ladders. And bless him, Andrew Gregory, I got on really well with him. When we were out in Romania, it was when the Gulf War was starting to just all the rumblings, and he was coming to visit us for literally a day and a half. Then he was flying to Turkey, because that was the route the original invasion was going to go through. That all got put on hold, so he stayed with us for about 5 or 6 days. So Chris Collett just said, well, Chris Collett actually had to go back. Was Chris Collett still there at the time? Anyway, so I ended up spending a lot of time with Andrew Gregory, which was superb. And then at the end of that job, I'll come back to some other things, but at the end of the job, Andrew Gregory helped me on my next role, which was really helpful. Just got my name noted, which was quite useful. But yeah, so in that tour, and then went off with, what was it? 4 weeks to go, because the CO was about to disappear abroad. I think he was being seconded somewhere. anyway, there were a lot of people who were just being dragged off into this whole beat up start for the Second Gulf War, and in the last minute, so about, well, I say it was well before the war started, so it would be middle of September. I got told, by the way, Ian, you're going and go embedded with the Americans. So within the space of 4 weeks, I went to on beat up training. Alistair was born, and then ran away for. I was away end of October, early November, out in Kuwait with the Americans for the whole of the Second Gulf War. So that was again another just fantastic experience, different from the first one for many reasons.
Yeah,
but a fantastic experience. So,
and it's very interesting that you call it the Second Gulf War.
Yeah,
and I think that's because you experienced the first Gulf War.
Yeah.
Whereas someone from my generation, it's the invasion of Iraq. It's
true.
We don't call it the Gulf War. Never once has it been mentioned as the Gulf War from my generation, I suppose.
Interesting. Yeah.
Whereas because you've maybe lived through both, I don't know what it is.
You just call it Optelic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Telic.
Yeah.
It's just called Telic regardless of number. Yeah. It is bizarre, but yeah, it's interesting to pick up on that the Second Gulf War.
Never really thought about it if it's something I've made up or something that always used to say. But,
I think others in I feel like it might be an officer thing potentially. I'm not 100% sure, and I think your generation as well, where joining in the 80s, where you then saw the first Gulf War take place, and then this thing that's happening in the early 2000s. I just think that's potentially a generational type thing, but also potentially a rank thing as well.
Could be.
It's just interesting when I heard you say it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you say that was different from the first time. Well, I think the main thing is Kuwait hadn't been invaded, so that was the base for us, wasn't it? To then move into Iraq.
Yeah.
So did you feel? I mean, you've also got a lot more experience at this point. Did you actually pilot at that point, or what were you doing for that?
So I was embedded with the Americans. So we had a very small team under a chap called Albert Whitley, who was brigadier, but then got promoted to Major General as everything kicked off. Called the SBLA, Senior British Land Advisor. So there are about four or five of us, I think. I can't exactly remember how many. Most of us majors, and we were embedded. So I was embedded on the operations side, i.e. the current operations with the Americans. So I don't know if you've ever seen any pictures of an American war room where they've got just banks and banks of screens and probably about 100 desks in tiers. That's what it was like. So all the different parts of the moving beast of what was going on in Iraq, or going to go on in Iraq, were represented there. And so as the Brits, I was the link into the British operations about what our capabilities were, what we could do, what we were going to do, all the battle updates that would come through at that operational side. Somebody else was dealing with the plan side, which was the planning and the strategy, and so sort of three or four of us in those different places. So that's what I was doing. I was embedded and surrounded by Americans, and it's always a debatable fact, but I always like to claim it. So the Americans have two different IT networks. One is the NIPRNet, which is restricted, and then the SIPRNet is secure secret net. And I had access to the SIPRNet after a lot of wranglings because I needed to be able to interact with them properly, and there was no other way of doing it. So I got restricted access to SIPRNet, which was a little tick in the box. But so I was fully embedded with the Americans at that stage as part of that British team. So
okay, so giving more advice and guidance than.
Some of the advice and guidance, some of it's just updates. Just passing updates through, because just making sure that there was that British voice inside that command. So the what was it, a 2-star American, J.D. Thurman, big redneck. He would run that C3, the combined sort of operational centre, and so I was the voice into that. So early on, yes, it was partly about advice. I was running around making sure that. So, for example, I don't know if you remember from the first Gulf War, there were some blue on blues with American A-10s shooting some of our armoured vehicles. And there was always a threat of that. And so one of the little things I got involved in was making sure that they were talking about Blue Force Tracker, which was like a transmitter on vehicles, which could be seen above, so you could see where the friendly vehicles were. Or just the little arm patches, you get a little flash, an IR flash. So if you got an AC-130 with its a gunship going round, they could see through their goggles the flashes, so you could see what the friendly troops were. Just trying to secure all that from the Americans, because it was American kit. We had nothing. Securing space on ranges to fire depleted uranium rounds and all these sort of things. So I got involved in all of that stuff in the beat up, and then making sure that we had some stuff. So I secured a load of Blue Force trackers, even though they were limited numbers. So there's one per major unit. Just getting sheets of all this, just as much as I could get to make sure that we were part of the embedded American forces, but safely embedded. So, all these things are sort of flashing back. The little thing was just like that I was trying to do.
Yeah.
So some was advice, some was it was just making sure we secured our position, making sure that the plans, whilst there was a separate plans department, make sure that as that rolled over into operations. So, and then as the war started to run through, I call it war, the invasion started to run through, just tracking where all the different American forces were, so I could pass that back into to our team. It was that link, that liaison, if you like. And then very early on, as the Americans, it was a bizarre situation really, because there was a was it 3ID? I can't remember now actually. There was an American force that was going through Baghdad. And as soon as it got through the airport, which had been quite heavily bombed, as soon as it passed through there, the Central Forces Command wanted to send a headquarters in, which was actually ahead of whether it was 3ID or wherever their headquarters was, which is on the south side of Baghdad. But they were insisting on doing this. Why? This forward command post they wanted in there. Anyway, they decided they were going to do it. So I flew in on one of the first C-130s into Baghdad. I like to claim that I was first Briton there, but I certainly wasn't, because the SF were already in there. And there are one or two people who were embedded with Americans claimed they were in there. But anyway, one of the first ones in, which was really, really, it's quite exciting, because just working with the Americans, whilst the airport itself had been cleared and they were carrying on through to the green zone and over Tigris and continuing through Baghdad. We were sort of based at the airfield, but then they wanted to set up a headquarters, and so they're looking for a palace to go into. And so we were going out into a small reconnaissance. It got a little bit heated a couple of times, because nothing was cleared behind. Just because the troops have gone through doesn't mean anything's cleared behind. But we were just looking for locations, and I thought it was a strange decision, because you've got a regime which has just been pushed out. And if you take over a palace, isn't that like another regime? Why would they do that? But they wanted to do that, and they eventually selected a place which had been bombed. So it had a couple of holes in it, but actually it was just on the outskirts of on the edge of Baghdad, not too far into the centre. And so that's where we set up an emergency. Oh, I say emergency, the really forward command post. And it was a fascinating time. That was just being there at that time with everything going on around. I
think it's always interesting working with the Americans. They do definitely see things differently to the Brits, but an experience that you'll keep with you forever. And you finish that tour and you come back, and how long is that? Can you remember how long you were out working with them for?
Yeah, so it was just over 6 months.
It was 6 months.
Just over 6 months I was out there. Yeah. And then they came back to came back to Germany. So that was so then I had actually not long left really. Well, I left, it's about a year left in Germany, as second in command. About a year, just over a year.
Yeah.
So I just went back to doing what we were doing, sporting exercises. In fact, and then we had the the next time where we came across where you come across the vulnerability of helicopters, where we had a crash in the Czech Republic. So we, the CO was Alex Tucker at the time. He was away. I can't remember where he was anyway. But we had an exercise that we were supporting, an exercise over in the Czech Republic, and Lynx helicopter flying up a small valley, very, very narrow valley, with 4 gunner passengers on board, hit some wires, went straight down, and all 6 were killed on the spot. So it was, there was a lot to deal with. And there was a young chap out there at the time called Keith Reesby. And I gave him a shout out because there was a desire straight away for me to send out one of the experienced OCs out to just support him, because there was a lot going on with all the Czech police, all these different agencies. Everybody wanted to get around this aircraft. The Army, of course, sending out an accident investigation team. The whole, there was a lot going on. But I spoke to Keith a number of times, and just to check, so right, okay, what are you doing? What do you need to do? And just making sure, are you okay? Because, of course, he went down to identify one of the bodies when, I'm sure it was him. Anyway, but the people from it was only a small detachment out there, had to go down and identify some of the bodies to confirm it was them. Anyway, I didn't send anybody out to support him, and he did a cracking job, absolutely brilliant job. And I thought he was absolutely superb. It really just stood out for me. It really, it matured him, I think, and probably, hurt him as well. So you always think back about that as a right decision. But anyway, so we had that, which was quite it was a very tough time for the regiment, because, excuse me a second. I want to go and tell the families. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah. Difficult time.
Yeah, very difficult. Difficult because you feel responsible as well, and having to tell them. And you're not even there, Yeah. So it's you do times have a feel of almost imposter syndrome, because I wasn't there, I wasn't involved in it. All I'm doing is, yes, I was in charge of, I'd sent them out there and blah 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 and everything else, and having to tell them, and the young captain who was attached to us from the gunners, Doug Luce, he'd only just got married quite recently, sort of a couple of months before, so having to go and speak to his wife and say what had happened. And especially, it was really difficult circumstances, because it wasn't not a night accident. So, but yeah, that was probably, I feel for even police or anybody else having to go and tell people when there's an accident that's happened, and even though there's no connection there with those individuals, having to do that, it's just, it's quite hard work.
Mm. Mm. But another one of your part of the role, part of the job, and you stepped up and you delivered, because that was part of your role. But you did, you didn't shy away. You didn't let others do it. You didn't let. No,
I could never do that.
So you're a big man for doing that. I know it's part of the role, but there are potentially others out there that may have got the welfare officer involved or something like that.
Yeah, true.
So
true.
Well done in yourself for doing that.
No, thank you. I never really think about it that way. But just it was a real shame. It was it took a bit of a shine off the tour, but in saying that, it's part of what happens in life. And when you're playing with dangerous kit, these things do happen. And it was just a real shame. But so that was sort of the back end of my period in Germany. Before I sort of packed off to UK, actually. And in fact, I think my family had already gone back to UK. So, because my next job was going to be Chief of Staff of Colchester Garrison. And and it was a short notice I knew there was a tour coming up, but the job that I was supposed to be running for, that Andrew Gregory had helped me get through a filter, because I didn't have the qualification for it, supposedly. But I actually got on the board, and I was told I'm number 3 out of 3. If the other 2 get other roles or don't want it, or if they get other roles, then you'll get it. Unfortunately, the second one got it, so I didn't. But then there was I'm just trying to remember timings. I was on an exercise somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and someone told you've got 24 hours to decide. The board wants to give you a good job, so it's one of these 2 jobs. Do you want to be Chief of Staff, Colchester Garrison, which is a brand new role, or something somewhere else? Oh, well, that's it, Colchester Garrison. So literally came after that exercise, came straight back, had a look at the location, trying to fight the army system to get a house, because the paperwork hadn't caught up at that stage. Managed to get a house, and then pretty much the family moved back. Poor cracky, in next to no time, in the space of about a month or so. And I had to go back out to Germany to finish off the role before I could actually take up the role. So all this accident happened in that period over there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So with your move back to the UK, you mentioned this then, it's a new role. So you're starting something that was brand new? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the stage when at Colchester there were 6 barracks, and then they were putting it into a PFI of 1 big barracks, so knocking down 6 or 5 old ones. And it was at the start of that, so the diggers had just started on this big PFI. So there was a huge amount to get involved in them, which was a really exciting time. Again, it was just something completely different. You know, I was dealing with contractors, I was dealing with the financials, or not directly involved, but aware of all the financials for private finance initiatives and all these sort of pieces, and also just the rest of what the garrison needs to do for 16 Air Assault Brigade. So it was a really quite an exciting time in its own right as well. So
and is that as a major?
That was a major.
That was a major. Yeah,
that was a major. And at that stage, I was already ready for promotion, and this is the irony I mentioned earlier, that when you look at whether it be the infantry or the Royal Engineers or whoever it be, or the Army Air Corps, when you get promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, there's only a certain number of places they've got. So for the Army Air Corps, I can't remember, maybe something like 7 or probably even less than that. But what then they used to split it down to is different age groups. So on the early age group, the high flyers, sort of 36 to, and I honestly can't remember the brackets. I think it was something like 36 to 38, 38 to 40, 40 to 44 or something. I can't remember. But on the bottom bracket, there's maybe 1 place. So that's for a high flyer. Then the second bracket, there's maybe 2 places. And so those are still doing really well. Then the next bracket is those who are they're going to the heart of it, but not the high flyers. And then you have the old boys at the top who just, right, you've done well, and you just need to get there's a promotion for you in a more benign desk job or whatever it be, or a specialist skill set, whatever it be. And so I got more points on the board than somebody who was born in the year before me, just on that cut-off. So he was in the next bracket, so he got promoted and I didn't, because he was 3 hours older. Because if I'd have been in the other year group, I'd have been more points than him. Anyway, that's one of those little nuances you hit or you get. So yes, I got pulled off. So I did. It was a 2-year tour at Colchester. I asked for an extension. I got an extension to 3 years, but after just under 2 years, I got pulled off what they call the reserve list. So if you don't get one of the first promotions, if a job comes up, they need somebody with either a certain skill set or you're just next on the list, i.e. in sort of, scoring order, and you got pulled through. So I got pulled off the reserve list for a job at ARTD, the Army Recruiting and Training Division, which was on promotion to Lieutenant Colonel. So that was really good. And bless him, so my garrison commander was Tony Barton, and he was great because he was about to leave the army, and he turned around and said, I'm not going to leave the army for another 6 months. I'm going to stay for another 6 months so you can go and take up this promotion, because otherwise both people moving, there might have been a blocker on it. So bless him, he actually extended his service by 6 months to allow me to take up promotion and go off a new job.
Nice.
And and at that stage, 2 children just going to school age, or one at school age and the other one just nursery. And so actually we decided we're going to settle. So bought a house in Colchester and left the family there, and I commuted from wherever from then. So just to give them some stability, which So,
and what's this next role you move into then? Are you actually going to one location, or are you kind of dotted around the country? You're a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, so it's based out of Uphaven. And it was looking after, I think the job title changed about 3 times, whether it was special projects or change management. But in essence, I was looking after the programs, for example, after all the inquiries, I think it was the Darley Blake inquiries into the deaths at Deep Cut for the recruits. And there were a lot of fallout from that, and a lot of changes that need to be implemented, whether it be setting up a training college for all those who are going to be instructors, and lots and lots of different changes. So I got involved in all those programs. I also got involved in, there was some outsourcing of some of the training regiments, and forgive me, I can't remember that there were 2 blocks. One was about Royal Engineer training, and the like, and REME training. I think they were the same. Were they in the same? Yes, I think they were in the same bucket. But certainly REME training as well. And then the second bucket. So one had already been provisionally awarded to a consortium who were going to sort it out, and the other lot was the price that had been put in was ridiculous. And this was things like, the Army Catering School. There's a lot more than that, but that's the one that sort of jumped out in my mind. There are a bunch of smaller units. The Police Training College, yeah, I think that was part of it as well, which is at Wethersfield. So anyway, there were a bunch of other stuff. And so my job was to look at what's the in-house alternative of not going out to the market to deliver these. So I was looking at a complete estate rationalisation programme. So it was all about that sort of change management for the Army Training Division. I didn't get involved in the recruiting too much. There was a bit around the outsourcing to Capita, I think it was, for the Army recruiting.
It's interesting you say that, because I was at the training regiment. I was at Gibraltar Barracks, which is 3 RSME for Royal Engineers, at that same time, because I was there from 2005 to 2008, and 2008 was when I went out to Germany. And it was definitely in that last period that it was changing, transferring over. Was it I want to say PPP? Yeah, triple P, wasn't it?
That's right.
What was that?
So that was another part. I think it was the REME. I was talking about an aviation REME. That was the other piece, and maybe not, because the RSME came under a PFI as a private finance initiative. So industry comes in and brings the money in, and manages it and runs it and effectively owns it. And the MOD pay a mortgage until 20 years, 30 years, then it owns it and go on from there.
Right.
A PPP is where the government pays the money, so the capital money to build it, but still has a company to build it, or consortium to build it, run it, and everything else. And this is one of these nuances that I got to learn in my last job in dealing with the Treasury and how money moves. So sometimes the Army will say, we've got there's 2 different types of money. CDEL, capital DEL, so you can build things that you can own and sell, and RDEL is money that you spend like wages or gas bills, or you don't get anything for it. And sometimes, and there needs to be a specific balance. It used to be a government balance, seems to change all the time, especially under the new government. But there used to be a balance on what different types of money. So if you got lots of CDEL, capital DEL, you went for a PPP because you had the money to build it. If you didn't have much money, you went for RDEL, because all of a PFI is you don't get anything back for it apart from the asset at the end. So you don't really own anything. So depending on which was, and it started off as a PFI, and then halfway through realised there was actually a load of capital that could be spent. So to change into, as you say, a PPP, which is a public-private partnership. I think that's what it stands for.
Okay.
So that was what, and so actually I came across to Chatham quite a few times. To look at the whole engineering school, and also Minley was involved.
Yeah,
in
so
it as well.
Minley's the Gibraltar Barracks.
That's right,
and then Brompton Barracks is the Chatham one.
That's it.
But yeah, both training regiments for the Royal Engineers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, because I was dealing with part of the diving pond as well. Was there a diving pond?
Yeah.
And having to relocate the diving pond or something, or build a new one. Okay. Maybe that's part of the regional plans. Don't know.
Well, you got this is
Minley.
So at Minley, you've got Hawley Hard,
which
is the lake.
Yes,
where we did. Yeah, the divers are down there. And you do all the water supply, watermanship stuff down there.
Yes.
I don't think that's moved though.
It may have been. There was something about the.
But there was a lot. They've rebuilt different buildings and stuff around it. I know it's changed a lot.
It might have been that. I remember something because I remember it just flagged my mind because of your diving.
Yeah.
Your diving course. So
yeah. There's definitely been a lot of change especially when I left in 2008. So you were involved in that, and again, that's something new. You weren't training that for your previous years. You had to learn new ways of dealing with it. And was you dealing a lot with civilian companies at that point in that role, or was it still military?
So it was more civil servants and the consortium. So there's we end up being acting as I think they called it customer one. So we would be the user as Army Recruiting and Training Division. So because Chatham came under, or the Royal Engineer Training RSME came underneath ARTD, we were going to be the end customer to use the asset. So we had that input, but then we had the specialists from the Royal Engineers to support on some of those specialist skill sets. But then that was linking into the procurement arm that were buying making the deal with the consortium. So I end up dealing with sometimes the civil servants, sometimes the project team, and then the quite often sitting in meetings with the consortium as well. So it was just fascinating. It was a real learning curve. Good sounding board from outside. So
you do that for a couple of years.
That was that 2 years? Yes, that was. In fact, it was. So I went there. Trying to add up my years now. 6. Yes, so it was going to be a 3-year tour, but it was just under 2 years I did in the end because, and again, this is another of these ones which was, I was just starting to get to that stage. The first time in my career I was going, I've been in for like 16 odd years and I think I forgot to leave. I was supposed to do 6. And so there was a little bit of me going, okay, at some stage I've got to leave, but when do I leave? And so there was a really, really good job that came up in MOD main building. And a chap called Matt Lowe from the Paras, who I knew quite well as a full colonel, when I was sort of just talking to him about it. And so with a few conversations, I managed to get myself on the radar for that role. And again, it's usual score. I was way too late in my career to realise that actually you have to help yourself because the army won't help you. You have to help yourself. You have to find your own career. Unless you're that 1% that's career pathed from the beginning to do the MA jobs, all the jobs. As long as you do them well, you've got that career path made out for you. The rest of it, you have to look after yourself. Anyway, on that one, I wanted a job in London because I thought if I'm going to leave, London's the best place to leave from because I can network. But at the same time, if it's a really crunchy job, if I decide to stay and I do a good job, I've got a great tick in the box. So, and then at the same time, the one thing that I haven't really mentioned is, so normally the officers going through the next course from Major is Staff College. And whilst you don't have to do Staff College it's a year's course at Shrivenham, if you don't have to do Staff College to get promoted, it certainly helps your chances. And if you're going to go on beyond there, generally you have to have done Staff College. On my exams I did, I missed out on I think it was, I don't know which one of the exams by literally a point. So I wasn't going to be selected. There was then a period when they changed over the Staff College, and I can't remember exactly what it was that was changing, but they suddenly realised they had a gap for about a year where they didn't have any students or they had a lack of students going through. So I got suddenly told, whilst you haven't passed that exam well enough, you got a C rather than a B or whatever. I can't remember what the point system was. You're at the top of the list to go to Staff College. So I would have gone to Staff College as a lieutenant colonel rather than a major. But then I looked at it and thought, okay. And then there was an opportunity there was also an opportunity to go to Canada, to do Staff College in Canada rather than UK. But my head was sort of in the spin going, right, okay. I was setting my heart thinking, I pretty much think I want to leave. There might be a slim chance I'd stay if that job in London just proved fantastic and there was something super at the far end of it. And it ended up with this dilemma that if I didn't take that job, I wouldn't have that opportunity. Therefore, I go to Staff College, which would put me back by another year doing a job. And at the time, I would then be due another operational tour, which was no drama. I mean, that's the bit I always miss, is the operational tour. But that meant that I would have to then come back into another job, and it'd be another probably 3 or 4 years before I could leave. And then I was thinking, I'm going to be late 40s by then rather than early 40s, and that could make a lot of difference when trying to get in a second career. So there was a lot going around, really, and I thought, well, Canada would be great, but actually that's the wrong country. And if I did staff college, you're down in Shrivenham, you haven't got time to do all that networking to build yourself the network to leave. So I decided not to go. So I pulled myself from the list for staff college to go and do the London job, which in hindsight, was that the right or wrong thing? It worked out. Would it have changed things? Yeah, probably, but heaven knows it could have been worse or better. Never know. So I then went and did this job in London, which was, again, it was a fantastic job. Absolutely fantastic. Something completely different. I was looking after effectively money again. So you go from training, you go from, change management, you go from all these different environments and just absorb it. So yes, I got pulled just under 2 years and went up to MOD main building. The bit that I was working was called RP Centre, which is Resources and Plans Centre. There was Resources and Plans Army, same for Navy, same for RAF, and then there was Centre. And those are the places where, so the MOD's budget for the Army would go through Army RP. And so Centre RP were looked after anything which was, not everything, but most things that were tri-service or contentious or had ministerial input. So, for example, DII, the programme, I had the money for the Defence Information Infrastructure Programme, a huge amount of money sitting on my books. I dealt, I had about 50 odd programmes from housing through to the decommissioning of nuclear submarines, the IT systems, all these different programmes. It was at £22 billion over 10 years. That was the programme that I was shuffling with. And it was fascinating because what I didn't want to do is just sit in London and go, right, I'm in London, you can come to me, I'll make the decisions. I wanted to understand each of those programmes. So most of them, I went out and visited them. And it was quite funny because they would go, why are you out there? Why are you coming out to see us? And I was, well, there's an easy decision to make here, is that if you tell me all about your programme and let me absorb it, when the minister turns around and said, I need £50 million for housing, and I've got to pull it from somewhere, I know where I can pull it from your programme without destroying your programme. If I don't know, I'll just pull it and you'll be destroyed if you're not lucky. So engage me in it and I'll be able to help you. And I can know where I can't pull money from, and I'll find it from elsewhere. So I just spent that time really understanding the programs and then managing that program, which was just it was a fantastic job, and it did give me the right sounding board. I came out the back of it with a cracking report, and that's not what I ever did a job for, but enough to make me say I could stay if I wanted to and still have there's a good future there. But in saying that, I'd just come around to the decision. And it was off the back of when do you leave, that old adage. And a friend of mine said to me, it's when the push and pull factors go in the same direction. And I thought, okay, what does that mean? And then I suddenly realised what it meant. And, I realised that, for example, as a lieutenant colonel, could I get promoted one more rank? Yeah, possibly. I would have hoped so. 2 ranks? Probably not. Especially having not done staff college. But anyway, I could have got promoted. Otherwise, I'm going to carry on at that same level. So as everything else has been either promotion, new jobs, all exciting stuff. And whilst I would do new jobs, I just felt I was going to be in a bit of a plateau and actually not really going anywhere. And that's not what filled me with excitement. I think another thing was that knowing that those jobs would tend to be away from operational units and more likely to be in desk jobs. Well, even if it was, apart from sort of, brigade or maybe a divisional headquarters. I knew then that no matter how much work you did down at the front end to set something up for a programme, that could be changed over by a minister just going, I want another 50 million in the centre. And how depressing is that? And I just thought, maybe that's the excitement starting to wane a little bit. I want to leave on a high, not on a I've had enough of this, I need to leave. And then the other thing, I always knew I wanted to do something in business. I always knew I wanted to leave. And I just don't know, there was something in me just going, I just want to go and do that. So from back end middle of 2009, I submitted my resignation letter just after I put myself on crutches, actually. So
Okay.
So, another little anecdote about army water skiing, which we can come back to if you wish. But so that was my career went to, and how I got through to London.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's quickly touch on the water skiing. So was you on holiday, or was you on army stuff? Or
no, I was on army stuff. So you know, I think we talked about this earlier about adventure training, and there's lots of adventure training out there. I found through a number of years I was helping set up adventure training programs, and then just couldn't go for whatever reason, and it just got really frustrating. And it was, I think it was about 2000. In fact, it was after the second Gulf, after the Iraqi invasion, or the invasion of Iraq, and I came back and I thought, no, I'm going to do something. Bollocks! I'm not at this. And I saw, because I used to get, being second in command, I used to get all the notices through, and I saw one going, Army Water Skiing Championships. Now, I could water ski. I wasn't good, but I could water ski. And I thought, yep, that's the one for me. And I managed to rustle up about 4 or 5 other people. I said, do you want to have a go at this? I'll get the money. I'll sort it all out. I'll get the money, and we'll go and have a bit of fun. They went, yeah. So we did. So I went over to the Army Water Skiing Championships, had a great bit of fun. But there was the guy who was running it was about to leave the army, so they're looking for somebody else to run it. And I looked and thought, I think we could make more of this. So I took it on. So I took on the chair of the Army Water Skiing Association, introduced wakeboarding as well. So we became water skiing and wakeboarding. Made sure introduced, there were 3 layers. There was advanced, immediate, and a beginner. So if you'd never water skied before, you could come along, and by the end of the week, we'll have you going down a slalom course on 2 skis, not on 1, on 2 skis, and it'll be a half-width slalom course, so you would still be doing this, and we'd have a competition at the end of the week. So we had this whole piece. Anyway, so that led to competing also in the inter-services. I was never that good, but I was good enough. Anyway, my last championships that I ran, it was over in the Cotswold Lakes, the water skiing park there. I basically came off at reasonable speed, enough that it twisted my foot round. It basically, how you go over your ankle? Well, I went over my ankle, under my ankle, and forwards on the ankle as well. So it destroyed my ankle completely. Oof. And anyway, so the amusing thing was I was that was the last one, and so in main building. So I was commuting from home at that stage, which was actually something else we can talk about as a big step into the civilian world. There was a Navy chap who every 2 minutes, he went skiing with the Navy and broke his leg, so he came in on crutches. And I mean, this little open plan office, all we could hear was his crutches walking up and down. He was off crutches then, and then he was cycling to a physio after breaking his leg and got hit by a taxi. Taxi door opened, he went straight into it, and he's back on crutches. Anyway, so everybody kept going, oh, David, what have you done now? And then I walked in on crutches, and everybody went, David, what have you done? Turned around, it was me. I was on crutches in the summer of 2009, hobbling across London on crutches with a tube strike as well. Anyway, there we go. But that was, so a friend of mine was, because I was commuting from home most of that time, a really good friend of mine, a civvy, nothing to do with the military, but a really good chap. He was giving me a lift to the train station each day. And one day as we were driving, as I got in the car, I said, we need to stop at the post office in Colchester. He went, why is that? And I went, I've got a letter to post. He went, oh, what's that then? I said, it's my resignation. And I don't think I've seen a little polo stop so quickly in all my life. This thing just stopped on its nose and went, you're doing what? Anyway, so that was when I put my letter in the post. You still did that in the old days. So,
well, I was going to ask this because that's 2010.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
2009, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, 2009. You left in 2010.
Yeah.
So in 2009, resignation letter, and is that an officer thing because you're commissioned? Because I'm pretty sure that as a sergeant, as a corporal, whatever it might be, nowadays we call it the 7-click to freedom. Some say where you literally click on the computer system to say you want to leave. And I'm also pretty sure back in the days before the JPA system, you used to just say, oh, I'm signing off. That's all they said. I'm signing off. There was no letter. So is that something that the officers had to do because you wanted to leave?
Yeah. So there wasn't something online. I had to. So I emailed my my line manager, but he was a civil servant, so I also copied in the senior military person in RP Centre. So I emailed that. But I'm just trying to remember the reason. I think the reason that I was supposed to write to Army Air Corps Money and Records, so the Army Personnel Centre up in Glasgow. So I had to write to them. Why I didn't do it by email, don't know. But I do remember writing the letter. I remember posting it. So,
and is that to give them the 1 year heads up?
So yeah,
we have to live out a 1 year before we can leave. After
a certain point, so I'd been in for 20 odd years, so I could resign at any stage, and there wasn't a 1 year lead time. So it's an interesting one because and I just try and remember some of the fine nuances because it got a little bit messy, but I was warned it was going to get messy. So, so if you signed off, so if I say I'm going to resign, but they wanted to hold you in a position until they found somebody else to replace you, I'm pretty sure they could do that. On the other side of it, if they think, right, go on then, on you go, because you know what it's like when you resign from the army. Certainly, it was for me. I was warned. You watch them drop you like a stone. You sign off, you go, I'm leaving, that's it. They don't need to worry about it anymore. That's it, out the door. And when I resigned, I said, right, okay, I've got this much built up leave. I've got my terminal leave. So that means I'm going to leave on the 2nd of January. And I got a letter straight back saying, no, you're going in 4 weeks. Now, there were reasons that I wanted to reach the 21 years. But either way, it was like, well, hang on a minute, I'm owed all this leave as well. But basically, they cancelled it. So, and the short and the long, that my boss as a civil servant was actually very ill. So I was doing a load of his job at the same time. So he managed to get somebody more senior to say, no, Ian can't take his leave now, annual leave or terminal leave, because he needs to do this job. He can only start his terminal leave in November, or annual leave in November, and terminal leave in December, or something like that. So basically, put it back to this is the 2nd of January, you're going to leave. So I'd engineered it for that day deliberately, but there were reasons. I wasn't trying to fiddle the system at all. But yeah, they tried to make it really awkward because they just wanted to get rid of me straight away and then deny that I had my annual leave. So you go, really? After 20 years?
Yeah.
That's what you want to do? It's a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
But that's the computer says no sort of syndrome. Anyway, so yeah, so I managed to win through on that one. But yeah, I wrote a letter.
What's your transition out like then? So you've done the letter. You've had that couple of years of, is it about time? Is it about time? And you get that moment. Yes, it is time. What's your transition to civilian life like?
I feel really lucky. I really do, because for those 2 years in Whitehall, I was commuting from home. So I was sort of a semi-civvy because I was in a suit most of the time, only rarely did to go in uniform, in a suit, going to the train station, getting on a train, going across the underground, going to a job, just happened to be in the MOD, and then going home again at whatever time at night. So I sort of got into, and I bought my house back in 2006, so just to settle the family. So I didn't have that wrench from a family unit of a regiment, because I wasn't in a regiment. I was just surrounded by civil servants, tri-service. You know, there were friends that I'd met, but none that I'd known forever. There was no family around MOD Whitehall, you know, that like is around a regiment. I was living in my own house already. I didn't have to try and find a house. The only thing I had to do was try and find a job. So to me, it was, I was lucky. I think I was lucky. I was also, one of the plans worked through really well. Being in London meant that I could, at lunchtime, go and have a coffee with somebody and just have a chat about their market, their environment, their company, you know. So I did quite a lot of networking just to find out what the hell's it like out there. So my transition was, I think I was really lucky. Okay. Half engineered, just half lucky. That I landed quite easily on the other side without going, shit, what do I do now? Apart from trying to find a job, that is.
Yeah. And on that, what do you look into? Because you've been a pilot for so many years. You've done a lot of other roles as well. So you've done a bit of management here, management there, in the sense of big projects. Yeah. So what do you set your kind of like goal to be next? What's that for you? What did you choose?
That's the biggest challenge I'm sure all of us go through.
Yeah.
I had no idea. what I knew I didn't want to do was just go off flying, because I just thought that if I did that for another 20 years, I'd be bored. So I didn't want to go into the airlines. So flying was sort of almost a thing of the past for me. Although if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd probably go and get my license back and have great fun again. But it was great when the Queen was paying at the time. But, you know.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest challenges I had. A number of people I'd go and speak to, and they said, look, what area are you interested in? And I'll introduce them to people. So I don't know. I don't know what I want to go into. And so, well, give me an example. Oh, I know, motor racing, you know, and you're sort of grasping at straws. And even when I went through a little bit of an exercise trying to work out what do I really want to do, you don't know what you don't know. So I had no idea. And that was the biggest challenge. And it was luck more than judgment, networking, if you want to call it that way, that got me my first job, and then my second job, and then my third job. So, not that I didn't have to go through interview process to get the jobs, but just being in front of the right people. So my first job, I had probably about 3 months still to go. And I used to coach and referee rugby at my boys' rugby club. So I was sort of involved quite heavily there. And there's one of the other coaches, you should go and speak to this chap who runs an aviation company down the road. I went, oh, okay, aviation, because he knew I used to fly. So I got introduced to him, and he wanted to grow his business into the wider MOD. He wanted to get some big business. He had aspirations, and because I'd just come from the centre, I knew where money was spent, I knew how it was spent, and so I could hopefully get at least some feeds of where the best place to bid for work and what sort of work was coming through. But he had aspirations well beyond what he could deliver. So anyway, so I worked for him for about a year. But do you know, the big thing was that it was a company that made a lot of money, but it made a lot of money through luck, not through really good, solid business planning and everything else. And I went in as business development, but you know, there's no way I could fulfill what he wanted. It was just totally unrealistic. I was trying lots of different ways to find a solution to do something along the lines of what he wanted to do. At the same time, just the sort of person I am, I was just going around the factory, the shop floor, just talking to people. What do you do? Oh, I know. And they all thought I was the new operations director who'd been there for 6 months but never left his office. And no, I said, no, that's not me. But I was just curious. I was just talking to them all. And what I realized at the end of, so I was on a fixed contract for a year, which then stopped. What I realized at the back was that you go into business going, can I float in this? This is a totally different world. I'm a soldier. That's all I've done. Yes, I've done lots of jobs, but I've not been in the real world. Call it the real world, the real business world. And so you never know if you're going to float or sink. And very quickly in that year, I realized actually, no matter how bad you are, if you've got common sense and logic and reasonably good leadership skills in the sense of just being able to engage with people and talk to them and understand and put some logic behind it, you could survive. And that was, so being such a appalling place taught me so much. I think if it was a really good place, I wouldn't have learned anywhere near as much. So, and that was luck. So it was a friend of somebody through the rugby club that got me there. I then was out of work because he just didn't want to renew it at the end of the year because there was nothing coming through where he wanted it to go. And another friend had a multimedia business, but they also used to outsource all of their manufacturing of advertising boards. There's the ones that you see around building sites. So, you know, the hoarding, all those beautiful, all the beautiful pictures. And
what it might look like.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. And so what he did, he bought the company that he used to go and to do the manufacturing of the billboards, of all those hoardings. But then it was losing lots of money and he couldn't work out why. So he just said to me, look, if you've got nothing to do you want to come and have a look at it? So I went in for a couple of months just to look at it. And actually, again, it was usual, just brought it down to the basics and worked out there was actually some very simple things to put in place to stop it losing lots of money. Like not having to reprint them 5 times because the design team changed their mind. You know, get them to sign it off as finished and then print it once. It was it was relatively simple. But that was really good. It was a stepping stone. But at the same time, then my youngest, a pal of his father, I got on very well with. And when he knew I was looking around for another job, he said, have you ever considered Serco? And I said, Serco, no, not really. Why? He said, well, my brother's one of the CEOs there. Give me a CV. I'll drop it into him. So whilst that got me my CV into the company, it then got passed down to, and then I got a phone call from somebody saying, look, I've been passed your CV, and actually we're just recruiting for a role. I've got 5 CVs, and I've got 6. Can you come for an interview? So I did. So that was the luck that got my CV in the right place, rather than just going through a filter and then the computer says no. And then I got selected for that role for Serco, which was going back to Shriven, actually, on the other side of the fence, running the place from the civilian contractor perspective. So that was a PFI and a PPP combined together.
Wow.
So it's quite nice coming home. So
nice.
Yeah.
And is that pretty much brought us up to date to where you are now?
No, there's a few years to go from that. That was 2011.
That was 11. Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2011. And I did that job, and I absolutely loved that job. So going back to when I was at ARTD, the 2-star, Andrew Graham, there were some of the projects I was reporting directly into him for, or certainly at briefing him. So I got on very well with him, and quite often was sitting on a train with him. So, and when I went to Shriven, I was the civilian contractor. They called me the Defence Academy Services Director. I was a civilian. He was then the 3-star in charge of the whole of Shrivenham. And so, of course, I went straight up to him, which was really nice. And I remember saying to him at times, General, I hope you don't mind, but that's the last time I'm going to call you General. And he just looked at me and I said, look, this place is crowded with military officers. And there are a lot of brigadiers and major generals who, some of them really think they're very important. And they are in their own right, but they're exaggerating their own sort of presence. As if I go in and call myself in my rank and start saying to you, calling you General, I'm also automatically kowtowing to you. And what I want to do is partner with you. I want to deliver you the best service you can get, and I want to put things back into the system. Partly because I love the system and I've been here, but also I just, that is the right thing, in my view, how to run this business. And he said, absolutely fine. So I used to call him Andrew straight away, and that was absolutely brilliant in front of all these other 2-stars and 1-stars who had all done their research, knew who I was. And I would call him Andrew. And straight away, they then didn't go, oh, you're just a lieutenant colonel, and that's what they would have done. They would have dismissed me because or spoken to me in the same way they would in the military with that rank. And so that was one of my first points where I think we discussed over a lot of cheese sandwich earlier. When I left, I left the military, and that made me who I am, and I will never forget it, and absolutely loved it. But I haven't carried that through, and I've never used my rank. I don't like using my rank. Even down to like all the friends up in Colchester when we settled, there are a load of dads or boys all the same age, and we all get on. And one of them one day called me, "Hey, Colonel," and I just said, "Please," and I just don't want that. And I know it's only meant as a term of endearment and everything else, but I left the military, and that was at Shrivenham was my first point where actually this is how it's got to be to make it work in a military environment, and then I just carried it on from there. So that was a great job. Anyway, I did that job, and then after a couple of years, I managed to pick up a wider portfolio. So actually, effectively got promoted. Well, I was promoted and brought somebody in behind me, but that stayed part of my portfolio. Grew the portfolio, and then in 2017, back end of 16, which ran into 17, they were just losing some bids and stuff, and made me redundant. Anyway, that was by the by. So I got made redundant, and then there was a chap I met while I was at Serco called Sam Hockman. He'd moved to NG, and when I got made redundant, obviously I was going out to all the people I know saying, "Okay, look, I'm now looking for a job. I've been made redundant." He said, "Well, I haven't got a job, but I know somebody who might have a job." So I then got introduced to somebody else who might have a job, and brought him for an interview. And the funny thing was, passed across, and then I was being interviewed by, come and meet this chap who was actually doing the job that I now do. And I remember sitting in the room, and he went, anyway, so he started chatting away, and I said, can I just stop a second, Mark? What, you keep referring to a job. What job are you talking about? Because I've just been told to come and have a chat with you. He went, oh, no, it's my job. Okay. So I had a chat with him, and then the following week I had a chat with this chap, John Jago, who'd been passed my CV, and then a chat with the CEO, and got the job. So it was luck that got my CV in the right place at the right time, because they'd already interviewed about 4 or 5 people and just not got the right person they wanted. So I then started with NG Aswas, which is now this part of the business has been sold off to Bouygues under the brand of Equans. So that's who we are, as the managing director of the nuclear business. So it's sort of £100 million business looking after all of the EDF's nuclear power stations, and a couple of old, retired, now being demolished coal-fired power stations and a gas one. Plus, we also look after all the emergency response kit for nuclear power stations.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I've been doing that for 7 years now. And I'd never, ever done a job for more than 3 years before.
Wow.
Even the Serco one, whilst it was over sort of 6 years, I then got promoted and did different stuff and realigned the strategy on it. So, but in saying that, there's been about 3 or 4 different very significant phases in this job. So that's what made it quite exciting. But yeah, I've never done a job for more than 3 years.
Well, there you go.
So, yeah.
Well, Ian, I think that does bring us up to date, right?
It does. Yeah.
But yeah, this moment in your episode is a great chance to get some advice from you. Now, you have said a few bits and pieces, but I want you to kind of give some advice for anybody that's thinking of joining the military. And that doesn't have to be specifically the Air Corps, it could be generally, but any advice for those people that are thinking of joining?
Yeah, goodness. There's probably lots, and then it might be nothing. But I think, so, if you want to join the military just to have 3 or 6 years of fun, go for it. Just go for it. It's an environment that you can't replicate anywhere else. You'll grow up, you'll do things and see things that you'll never, ever be able to replicate. And so I would say if anybody's thinking about it, just go for it. What's the worst that could happen realistically? I mean, whilst there are, sad times, but in big handfuls, if you don't enjoy it, then you leave, after your short term. If you want to make it, if you think that actually I'm not sure I want to make it a career, I think my biggest advice would be don't wait until you suddenly made up your mind you want to make it a full career. Start from the mindset that you want to make it a full career from the beginning, because you can still leave. But I left it too late. I joined for sort of 6 years to have a bit of fun, and then I kept getting promoted and getting new jobs. It was great. It's exciting. If I'd have set off at the beginning, and there was a moment in time, literally within my first year, where I was offered an opportunity to go to or to make it more permanent. And I thought, I don't know yet. And I'm absolutely sure if I'd said yes at that moment in time, things would have changed. So go in with the mindset of a full career and see where it takes you, because you can always leave.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that there's some, as you join, you will see them straight away. Some of them have been in military families and they know they've got to push and they've got to get their name and everything else. And I know it's a different world now with the youngsters coming through, because they're all on a short service commission. They've got to earn their regular commission. So it's like they never want to misbehave and have fun in those first early years. And actually, you've almost got to, really. But by the by, I think that don't underestimate the importance of just people knowing who you are. And it doesn't mean being rude and shoving yourself in their faces. But if there's an opportunity, for example, to present to a senior officer when they're coming through on something you've been doing, just put your hand up. Do that thing we'd never like to do in the military. Volunteer. Just say, can I do the briefing? Don't be pushy about it. Just say, if they say no, it's fine. But just try and get yourself in people's minds, because if people have got a choice, let's say promotion board, and I think we discussed this slightly earlier. If you get a promotion board where you got 6 names and there are 5 places, or there are 3 places, and they're all scored the same, if there's one of those in that bracket that that guy, Gav, I came across him about 5 years ago. Yeah, he was really impressive. Subconsciously, that's going to make a difference to your selection. Now, if you're an absolute knob, it would make a difference to your selection as well.
Oh, yeah.
But, so swings and roundabouts. But it's those little things that just make the difference. And I never realised that until I was second in command of a regiment, and my CEO said, the brigadier doesn't know who you are. And you're 36. You need to be, people know who you are, because he'll be on the promotion boards,
Yeah.
And so I think those are the 2 key things. But
yeah, that's
for a military career.
Some good advice, though, for sure. The next bit of advice would be for veterans.
Yeah.
This could be for people that are about to leave,
Yeah.
or maybe in your time you've been out, you've got some knowledge for people that have been out for a while. But advice for veterans as a whole.
Yeah, and this is one of my little passions, really. I think the start point is there's always a discussion: do you go for the first job or the right job? And my view is always go for the first job, because if it might be the right job, maybe it's not, you can move on to the next job, but you get yourself some experience. And so it's, to me, it's quite important. Don't try hanging out for the golden panacea, because you'll probably find that you go into an environment and think, okay, I enjoyed this, but it's not quite me. But it's taken one of the bits away, which is probably finding a home, buying a house, or moving out from a regiment to settling into civilian life. So it just takes away one of those pain points. And I think to me that's quite important. The other one is, and I think the army doesn't support it well enough, is that wherever you can, talk to as many people as you can, because if you can have the option of just go and see, can I do some work experience with you for 1 week, 2 weeks? Because it's great in terminal leave to just go off and do nothing. But actually, if you take a couple of weeks out there with somebody who will just give you some time, even if it's not offering a job at the end, it's giving you the opportunity to see what the real world's like. Because very quickly in 2 weeks, you might go, do you know what? I don't want to be a painter and decorator on domestic, or I really do want to do it. It's those little opportunities, because I think a lot of us leave not knowing what we want to do, because people talk about this major skill set that we've got about being loyal and really good at teamwork and reliable and all these sort of pieces. That's great, but that's not a job. That's part of what you bring. But where do you want to go and work? If you've got a passion, go for it. Just go for that passion. And again, it might not be the right job. So I think for me, those that are leaving, the other thing to do is just go and talk to as many ex-military as you can, but also talk to civilians who haven't been military, because we all have a biased view about the route that we've gone on compared to civilians. So my biggest point is just go and ask as many people as you can for a bit of advice. Yeah. People love being asked for advice. Yeah. And there's no hang up. You're not asking for a job. On the background, of course, you always are. But you don't have to say those words. But that just gives you a bit of a starting point in a career outside. Yeah. So
that's good.
That was I would say is the start point.
Yeah. And that really is some great advice. So yeah, I'm sure someone will take something from that. But Ian, how was it for you for coming on the show, being a guest? How was it?
I'll be honest, it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
Really?
Yeah, it was superb. No, I thank you. It was. You're very good at leading people through the right questions and picking up those pieces and keeping it a continuous flow. So nice. Thank you for that. But great. No, it was a pleasure. And as I say, I've never really done something like this before. I've never. Not so much I've never seen the need for it. It's more I've never had the opportunity, I think. But I'm not one to search for it. Yeah. And it was only because you met Joanna and mentioned it, and I thought actually it's quite good. But if it does help anybody, then fantastic. If it doesn't, you've probably wasted an hour and a half of your life.
No. Well, first of all, it's longer than that. But secondly,
correct, it is, sorry.
It will help somebody. And so for that, I want to say thank you for sharing everything that you've gone through during your time in the military, before and after as well, because that is as important. And also giving up some of your time. You've mentioned you're doing this role that's in charge of lots of things around the country. So thank you for giving up your time to be a guest on the show.
No, it's my pleasure. Look, thank you for you doing, not only doing these podcasts, which I think are absolutely brilliant. I really do. But also, thank you for your time and patience as well.
That's okay.
I think it's superb. I think you've got a cracking thing here going. I really do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Super. And I say this to all my guests. Thank you for your service.
Well, I have to say the same to you. Thank you for your service as well.
Thank you so much.
Because without your service, you wouldn't have probably got into this. So
yeah, it's very true. Very
well
true.
Done.
But it's been great, Ian. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thanks.
This has been Military Veterans Podcast. Out.